people who make the difference. And if teachers don't understand they make a difference in children's lives, I don't want them on my faculty, I don't want them in the building, and I don't want to transfer them. I want new people.
I've been teaching the same way for 24, 25 years, and this is nothing like anything I've ever done before.
Nobody comes in ever, in years and years. The last time you've been appraised was 15 years ago. Nobody knows what goes on in your classroom.
You're supposed to tell me. You're the teacher. You're supposed to tell me. I said, well, it works a little different in here. You're going to tell me in a minute.
Most people like to put it off. I'm like, oh, y'all just stupid. Y'all just this, that. But I like to sit there and talk to them like, well, at least we're learning and you're memorizing. And it's a total difference.
I got more interested in school. I wake up now like I don't play sick anymore.
And I really feel like this is where I belong.
I think I may leave.
You ever think in your darker moments that maybe this is not going to work?
I think not only my darker, I think about that every waking moment.
Everyone stays, but everyone changes. I believe that, but you have to be willing to change.
You're about to see a video record we've kept of the first 3 school years of a 5-year experiment. It's the story of the struggle to save a failing high school.
The Merrill Report, the $50 million gamble, is made possible by the people of Toyota. And by the Ford Foundation, the Pew Charitable Trusts, and Carnegie Corporation of New York, with additional funding from the Martha Holden Jennings Foundation, the Procter & Gamble Fund, and the George Gund Foundation.
December 1993. Philanthropist Walter Annenberg gives the largest single gift to public education in American history, $500 million.
At this point, I can't see any other way to guarantee our nation's future.
There are 2 things that are important about this gift. Its size and the way the money is going to be spent.
Walter Annenberg is given $50 million to endow the Annenberg Institute for School Reform at Brown University in Rhode Island, headed by this man, Ted Sizer. Sizer is the leader of the Coalition of Essential Schools, a reform program in over 800 high schools. Its goal is to remake the American high school.
Our standards for our students and ourselves are not high enough, and even the relatively mediocre and sloppily defined standards that we have are not met.
Low standards aren't the only problem with high schools in Sizer's view. They're too big. Some have 5,000 students. Chaotic and noisy, bells ringing every 45 minutes. Hardly ideal conditions for learning. Inside the classroom, on the other hand, teachers do most of the talking, and students are more likely to be rewarded for memorization than to be encouraged to find answers on their own for learning. Ted Sizer and the Coalition of Essential Schools have a set of ideas. They call them the 9 Common Principles, which, if put into practice, would change the way students learn and teachers teach. But change is hard work.
We're trying to change an institution, the rituals for which are 100 years old.
Older in the case of this particular high school, Woodward High School in Cincinnati, Ohio. Started in 1831, Woodward is the oldest public high school west of the Allegheny Mountains. President William Howard Taft graduated from Woodward in 1874. So did heavyweight boxing champ Ezzard Charles in 1942. By the mid-1980s, however, Woodward, a 4-year high school with 1,600 students in Cincinnati's inner city, was a deeply troubled institution.
I'll go back to a school that when I went there in '86, I thought was in the throes of retirement. The building was filthy. They allowed kids to eat anywhere and just throw garbage in bags anywhere.
We have kids who come here because they have nowhere else to go. They've tried to get into other schools and didn't get in.
We averaged 11 fights my first week there, a day. And I thought, what the hell have I gotten into?
We have students who are homeless, who when you call, you can't find anyone who'll even say they're their parent or their guardian, or they'll say they're their aunt or they're something, but then you start realizing that the child's homeless.
The PTA showed me a picture of hundreds of kids against the wall outside. They asked what it was. I said, obviously, it's a fire drill. They said, no, that's third bell, and those kids are cutting class.
We have kids who are the product of violent family situations. We have a fair number whose parents have been murdered. and who suffer a lot. There's a lot of hurt, a lot of anger. They're products of modern life in poor neighborhoods.
If you would look at grades 9 through 12, entering 9th grade this year, if nothing changes, when that class graduates, 40% of the kids will drop out.
Michael Brandt, now Cincinnati's superintendent of schools, was principal of Woodward in 1991. He was familiar with Ted Sizer's philosophy of change, what he calls the 9 common principles, which include small classes, teachers and students working in teams, and lots of individual attention.
Young people learn in different ways at different times. They're disposed to learn at different times. So a standardized application of education is going to be mediocre at best, certainly inefficient.
Brandt decided that his school should become part of Ted Sizer's coalition. He recruited teacher Diana Porter from another high school in Cincinnati to take charge of the experiment at Woodward.
I came here for one purpose, which was to start the coalition. That's why I transferred to this school. That's what my goal was, and I intend to stay here and accomplish that goal.
Brandt and Porter persuaded the Cincinnati School Board that Ted Sizer's ideas were worth trying at Woodward. The board said, okay, we'll give you 5 years to make it work. So in the fall of 1991, the experiment began with 240 ninth graders, that's about half the incoming class, and 15 teachers. Woodward High School joined the Coalition of Essential Schools. Walk into a coalition classroom at Woodward High School. The differences are obvious. It's less structured, less formal than a traditional classroom. Students sit in groups, not in rows. The teacher is more like a coach, moving around from group to group, not standing in front of the room lecturing. The idea behind the groups is that students work together to solve problems, instead of doing what they're used to doing in a traditional classroom, turning to the teacher for answers.
We go over things and they'll ask me this question and I'll say, well, we just looked at this in the book. Now let's go back and find it. You're supposed to tell me. You're the teacher. You're supposed to tell me. I said, well, it works a little different in here. You're going to tell me in a minute.
If you can choose, would you stay in a school like this, or would you go back to the regular school?
Go back to the regular school.
You would. You'd rather have the old-fashioned way? Mm-hmm. How about you?
Yeah, I'd rather go back too.
To the way it was in junior high school and stuff.
The earlier a youngster gets into the habit of, on her own, figuring out how to understand things, the sooner that child will be doing it when we're not looking.
What about the idea of working in teams? I noticed that you sit around in small groups and work.
Teams are right because you can't do certain projects by yourself. But sometimes you need a little help. Okay. You can't just be like, I don't want you to help me do anything, because I feel I can't do everything by myself. You need a hand once in a while.
If I ask the youngster to not only exhibit her work, let's say in mathematics and science, but also to explain it to me, then she has to be in the habit of explaining things. Very few youngsters are. They say, I get the right answer? Fine, don't question me. If you say, well, how'd you get the right answer? And is there another way you could have gotten the same right answer? Is yours the only way? Or, so what, you got the answer? What can you do with this?
Teacher as coach.
Teacher as coach. Student doing the work. Student displaying the work.
Do you feel you're learning?
I'm learning. Yeah, more than I thought I would.
Having students take responsibility for their own learning is another of Ted Sizer's basic ideas. Only then, he believes, will students go beyond memorizing to working with ideas.
What we care about in this world is doing things with facts. That's what the business community's been asking for. They don't want people who just know things. They want people who know things and can use them.
Put your magic on.
And if you insist on that use and make it serious and high standard use, then you're really talking rigor. The notion of education is simply the collection and kicking back of a lot of stuff doesn't stand even the test of common sense.
If rote learning doesn't stand the test of common sense today, neither does rote teaching. In most schools, teachers can close their doors and teach the way they please.
Teachers have been in these rigid roles of, You will get your grade book on the first day of school, and you'll get your roster, and here are your classes, and you'll shut your door, and you'll give me the grades at the end, and if you don't send anyone to the office, that's great, and you leave at 3:30. And that's not what it's like to teach here. It's not what it's like at all.
In a coalition school, teachers work in teams, which means their teaching methods are open to scrutiny and criticism from their peers. For some, the change is tough. For others, it's a breath of fresh air.
How's it work for you after 34 years of teaching?
I love it.
Really?
Yes. It gives me the ability to talk to adults for a period of day, which in teaching's a very little business.
Too much work.
Normally, you're just isolated in your classroom.
Right.
If you are overweight, your heart has to
So you get that kind of feedback.
harder than
Plus the support
it should.
from
Learn to manage
problems we've
stress.
had is getting everything tied together so that we're all teaching in the same general area, like this system that's kind of far out. When we did the globes, we could tie that in a little better because we had something in each class that could fit into it.
Because the idea is that every subject somehow connects.
Interdisciplinary.
So when you meet as a team, do you talk about kids? I can't seem to get through to Natasha. What are you doing?
That kind of thing. Plus what we're going to do tomorrow or what we're going to do next week. We set our own schedule.
What if one teacher on the team isn't working out?
Leukemia is a major disease.
Then you got problems.
Is a major disease.
Oh yeah, we got a team right now that's that way.
Of the white blood cell.
The German team has really got
Disease of
problems.
the blood.
And what do they do?
They've been fighting all year long and they just aren't accomplishing as much
In the
as
normal person,
towards
there are
coalition
about
goals.
Does it work for you? This idea of a team?
Absolutely. Sometimes.
When doesn't it?
I prefer not answering that maybe at a later time.
When does it?
At a later time I'll answer.
You don't want to answer either one?
No. Right.
The common ground, even when teams aren't getting along, is the students. All members of a team teach the same kids. Teacher teams meet for an hour every day to compare notes so they can make learning more personal. The idea is to get to know students personally. That's a big change.
When I was a teacher, we were encouraged not to get involved, not to get close to a kid.
This isn't like a police officer with a case where you just look at the crime, you don't get them emotionally involved in it. I think you have to be emotionally involved with kids if you're going to help them.
And you're willing to carry that responsibility as a teacher?
Yes.
Not only that, unlike years ago, we might just be one of very few or even the only people that they're able to get close with.
Is it harder?
I think the demands of the program are harder. I think the expectations are higher, that will follow up on kids, that will call more parents, that will figure out what's going on and try to correct it. It's not just the kids come into class, you teach them, they leave class, and you can breathe a sigh of relief and say until tomorrow. They're yours like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that's a much, the pressure level, the stress, it's much higher.
You're not going to just let go once they walk out of those doors. They're like, they're the beginning of this program here. They're important in this program.
But is it that you're forced to get to know them as people? They can't just be the kid in the third row?
That's what they don't like about it. They really don't like that about it.
Well, that's what they say they don't like about it to us.
Because they don't want us in their business.
But to the outside world, they'll say just the opposite, that they really like having a place that they can feel so comfortable. So a lot of it's just adolescence. They're not going to tell us. They're not going to tell their parents they love them. They're not going to tell their parents that they think it's okay. They're not going to tell us they think we're neat or they like the program.
But you think they think that?
I do.
You're not deluding yourself?
No, they do appreciate the one-on-one. I don't think she is. They appreciate the phone calls. They pretend they do not. They appreciate us touching them and one-on-one knowing them.
Many young people arrive at Woodward High School ill-prepared to learn, with emotional needs that have to be met before real learning can take place.
We have one child. His mama disappears for months at a time, and he needs us. Every morning he makes the rounds of every classroom to make sure that we are all in our proper places. And if one of us isn't here and we don't tell him ahead of time, he goes crazy. His behavior for the rest of the day is just nuts. And so we all sort of know that if we're not going to be around, that we single him out the day before and say, whisper, I'm not going to be here.
So you're doing a kind of parenting.
Pretty much.
That kind of parenting takes place in a daily class set aside for students to talk about whatever's on their minds. In the language of the coalition, this is known as advisement.
If I were projecting out, when I went to school, I never had a daily advisement program. I'm not sure I needed it. When I went home, I had a community of advisors. All my aunts lived in the neighborhood, my immediate family, my grandparents, so I was not lacking for advice. You look at today, then we've got almost 3,700 kids homeless in our district, living out of cars, living in various shelters. What they need when they come to school is completely different than what I needed when I went to school. And I think this program not only meets some of the academic challenges of the future, but I think it meets some of those other social and psychological needs more so than many of the other programs I've seen.
School has to be more like a family?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I believe in order to get to youngsters, to know, to get achievement from youngsters have to believe in you. They have to trust you. And you have to know why they tick. You have to know what kinds of problems that they encounter outside the school setting. I believe in these advisement groups. It gives you an opportunity to find out more about the youngster.
There's one individual, whom I certainly won't name, whose behavior was really quite a problem early on in the year, and it still often is. But when we found out about some of the background of the child, the behavior, although undesirable, was certainly understandable. Would you agree?
Do I not have, as a mom, a responsibility to say, look, I don't want you to make this mistake. I did it, and I made a bad mistake, and I don't want you to do it too.
Yeah, but what's to stop your kids from going out and doing it?
Nothing at all.
How you gonna grow if you don't learn from your mistakes?
Not really, because a lot of people do that again. Like my brother, he went to jail, he got out.
But that's different though. Yeah.
School is supposed to be reading and writing and arithmetic, isn't it?
This has to be self-esteem first. If they don't feel good about themselves, if they don't think they have some control over their lives, they're not going to learn, I don't think. They're not ready to then. This gave them a sense that we're going to listen to them, and that's usually all it takes. If they believe that we're going to listen when they have something to say, then they'll do what we want. And that sets the whole tone for what we do in our academic classes then.
Advisement. It seems flabby. Some kids do their homework. Sometimes they discuss politics. But somehow there's no, I don't know.
It's like home. It's like a good evening at home, you know? Sometimes the kids are doing their homework, sometimes they're off on this project or another project, but there's an adult supervising. Okay, there's an adult sitting there trying to figure out what kids need. In a good advisement group, and we have some excellent advisement groups, they are very focused and very directed.
When you do something wrong, the parents act like they didn't do something like that when they were young, like our age.
All right, what about that parents need to be honest with their kids? Is that up there?
You have to tell them why.
Have to tell them why. Okay, why?
Interestingly, when you ask a kid what they like about the Essential Studies program, often they say advisement first. Because it is a place where the pressure's off, where it's in some way student-driven. The needs of the students drive the curriculum. It's about them. It's the only class where they are the center. And to that extent, it's really necessary in every curriculum, but it's hard to plan for.
So if I misunderstand you, is everything up there that I need to know to understand where you're coming from?
Yes.
What you got first and second base?
Students use advisement in other ways. Do homework, study, help each other.
That's good. Well, how you mess up right here? Some like to take advantage of the time. Like if you need some work to be made up, that'd be a perfect time. Like you can go from class to class, or you can even or you can just sit there and talk if you want to.
Is it right though that you get academic credit for? You don't get credit for an evening at home.
You get credit, but I mean, that's sort of like funny money. I mean, you get an elective credit, but you still have to have a fine arts credit and a PE credit. So it's credit, but it doesn't help you graduate.
A huge obstacle to graduation in this high school, in many high schools, is negative peer pressure. It's not considered cool to do well in school.
It's the whole coolness thing. You always reading books. You always knowing this and that. You ain't cool.
I see so many students here who are they're so bright, but it's not the end thing to be. And they're really covering up that intelligence in order to be accepted. I've never seen so much negative peer pressure in my life.
You kind of want to fit in with everybody else, you know, and if everybody else isn't doing well, then you kind of figure, well, I must not be wanting to do well either.
That's a fatal notion in terms of education. You not only miss the content area, you really miss an appreciation for lifelong learning.
We're trying to change the culture of the school, to make it okay, to make more kids succeed. And when there's a mass, the critical mass of kids succeeding, then that's fine. But I think we're right at that turning point. I think that's where we are right now.
Porter, Brandt, and the others believe that well-run advisement classes create the atmosphere that paves the way for improved academic performance, which, by the way, is measured differently in a coalition school. Students are expected to stand up, to exhibit what they've learned. They have to think on their feet and pull together lots of information. It's not enough to simply memorize and regurgitate facts and figures.
We've resuscitated that old 18th century word, exhibitions. You exhibit your control, your mastery of something, and if it takes you a short time, fine, blessings on you. If it takes a long time, fine, blessings on you. But we're not going to give you a diploma just because you're 18. We're going to give you a diploma when you earn it. When you earn it, not by passing some test that is written somewhere else, but when you show us in a dialogue, in a formal sense, by looking at your real work, that you have met the standard, then we'll give you the diploma. It'll mean something.
The goal of the performances is to demonstrate to me that they have mastered the idea of the relationships between plants, animals, and their environments.
I did a climate on Tundra, and as you can see, the precipitation is very low. And in the summertime, it barely reached high level. And my location was Upper Van Lith, Greenland.
Being able to answer questions, being able to field questions. Also, there's a certain amount of testing of the concepts. Do they understand energy flows through the environment? Do they understand? They can show me this way rather than they've had 2 written tests. Some students do not do well on a paper pencil test, but they can present information.
About 2 weeks ago, we did an insect, but we had to pick the bones out of the body. It was dissected, and we had to pick the bones out the body and place it on this sheet of paper where his, like a skeleton was made out. And I have never did nothing like that, and it's different from what we did last year.
By springtime of the first year, the teachers know for certain just how much hard work change entails. How has this year been? I mean, I'm guessing that you started off on a real high, full of hopes.
You got it.
I sense a fatigue in this group.
Stress. It's been a lot of stress. It's not that it's all been bad, it's just been very stressful. It's new. Everybody's looking at us.
There's a lot of resistance within the school for the change.
Are other teachers scared, or do they have a real point? Maybe this doesn't work.
Well, it's kind of hard to assess something in less than a year. How can you evaluate a program in less than a year?
Oh, they'd already concluded.
Oh, yes.
Well,
this isn't working. This isn't working.
They're scared.
I think they're scared because it's unknown. Like anything that's
Change
unknown.
is difficult for everyone. Sure, they're scared. It's been real easy to sit behind your closed door and, nobody comes in ever, in years and years. The last time you've been appraised was 15 years ago. Nobody knows what goes on in your classroom. You don't send any kids to the office. You must be pretty good. Suddenly some people are going to know what's going to go on in your classroom. You're going to have to share all that information with 4 other teachers.
And so these other people know what's going on in your classroom?
Sure they do.
You don't seem threatened.
I'm not threatened by that, but I think other teachers may be.
You have to understand, I've been teaching in a traditional setting for 18 years. And to come into this setting, it's totally different. And I'm not very resilient to change.
Did you say come into it? You didn't sign up to be this. This is what was handed to you.
I signed up for it I applied for it.
Oh, you did?
I applied for it. I wanted to get I heard the program, I heard its philosophy, and I thought, this might be a neat idea. And I thought I'd like to try it.
You sound
A bit
lukewarm.
pessimistic, yeah, a little bit.
Will you stay with it? Can you get out?
I can get out whenever I want. I could transfer to another program, to another school. And I don't know what I'll do.
Has it been hard for you to adjust to this approach to a school? That is a team, a group, groups
Well,
of
it hasn't
four?
been, I wouldn't say it's been different. I've had some second thoughts as far as I missed the upper level courses, but I'm having third thoughts because I see now the students that, some of them who have been rather hardcore and resistant to the learning process, they're letting me know that they're coming through.
Okay.
So I'm making an impact, so maybe I should rethink
But
that.
you're wavering now, or?
Somewhat, yes.
You might not be here when I come back next year.
It's a possibility.
Have you applied for a transfer?
Yes.
Charles Wynn is not alone. Anxiety is in the air as the end of the first year approaches. Students have to take final exams, but in the coalition, it's not an exam in the usual sense, but a performance, an exhibition. Student attitudes, as well as their ability to demonstrate what they've learned, will provide a good measure of whether or not the experiment is on track. These ninth graders are rehearsing now because in 2 days they're supposed to present on stage in an articulate way, without notes and in 2 languages, everything they've been studying in their classes. It's a real challenge and everyone is nervous.
Is this the only one we'll ever have to do? No. Well, how often do we have to do it? Well, for sure you'll have one at the end of the year next year. And to graduate from this school, you're going to have some sort of a performance. Oh, they were sort of wrinkling up their nose, but they're excited about it too.
But you all seem to, do you have a lot riding on tomorrow's performance?
No, nothing's riding on it. We just want
Well,
the best.
it's the idea that they come through. You know that feeling of students coming through? You've been working with them and working with them.
Finish what they start.
And the idea of doing the best that they can do. A lot of these kids are so used to I was listening to somebody, all I have to do is get D's and at least I'll pass. Okay. That's striving for better and better.
So you do feel...
Yeah, I do. I want them to do well. They've been working on it, and I want them to learn that they can perfect something so that it is good, and they can show their best, not just that minimum. Blah.
What if tomorrow's a failure?
It's not going to be a failure. We have confidence in most of the students. We know who the weak ones are and the strong ones are. We know it won't be a failure.
See, it can't be a failure. It can't be a failure because they've come so far.
Yeah.
I mean, some people may have problems in their presentation, but that's different than being a failure.
That doesn't mean they failed.
Yeah.
Kids have never done this before, and they may be so
Because it's a
nervous that
process.
We've done small.
they'll bungle as soon as they get up there.
But
that doesn't mean it's a failure. Look at all the work they did.
We're very, very pleased that we've come to this point in the year when we can stand before you and say, we're ready to give our final performances of mastery. This is a big day for us and our program, and it's a big day for you because you've done a lot of work this year and you deserve to be recognized for it.
unfortunately, the results did not live up to expectations.
Guten Tag, Herr Demmer. Ik heiße Cleon Graham. Ik ben Fusang. Ik woon in Cincinnati. Ik woon bij mijn vader. Ik habe 3 broeders. Here's Kurt.
Guten Tag, Herr Demmer. Ik heiße Curtis James. Ik ben Fusang. Ik woon in Cincinnati.
I was blown away by the fact that the kids had worked that hard on their German introductions and couldn't do them. You know, that some of them read. They had the nerve to get up there with a card and read that. Just blew me away. It was like, well, anyone can do that. You wouldn't even have to study German for a year. I could have coached you to do that in a week.
You're Afro-German. I see. African and German.
I mean, I feel like I've coached my kids for a month around this final performance. We did a tape. We reviewed it in class. And they got up there and they couldn't say 2 sentences. And after a year, your final performance. I thought maybe today they were going to like reward themselves or something and say we've come a long way, and they were going to listen because they know how much work. And yesterday when we ran through them in the room, the kids did better in the room with the two groups than they did in the auditorium.
These animals are endangered due to the factories and the buildings complex.
I know some of the kids, how much they didn't want to get up there, and I thought when they got up there, they did it. I mean, I don't even like it if I had to get up in front of everybody like that. So for that part of it, they did nicely.
Can any one of you describe how your settlement will be governed?
I think the kids themselves don't have a strong enough vision of what they can do and what's possible.
I take that answer as a no.
And so every time they get up and see their peers get up, every time it starts building that vision for themselves.
But look from what we got in the beginning of the year. Look at the difference. If you can look back, remember that first day in here?
Well, cooperatively, there's no question about it. The groups got up there today and worked with each other, tried to cover for each other, tried to see that everyone had a role, so they understand the concept of what it means to work in a group. Now, we have to see that as a victory.
Yeah, well, compared to the beginning of the year, it is a whole different perspective for themselves. I'm sure if you talk to the kids now, they never would have thought they could have done this. Never. And they also see that they can do it, but they needed to work together to do it.
No question that the first year ended on a low note, but no one's giving up. In fact, Woodward's teachers get the opportunity to voice their doubts and ask their questions when the coalition's founder, Ted Sizer, visits Cincinnati and Woodward High School.
I don't feel that I am really teaching them the content, whether it's less or more or what, or they're not learning it because they're incapable of learning it and understanding
You're
it.
teaching it, but they're not learning. And this is, yes, I mean, what you're saying is poignant. And
So then you walk away feeling, I really didn't do what I was supposed to do. I didn't do the job that I feel that I'm supposedly getting paid for.
Which, yes, you did, because in a cynical way, you did cover the chemistry.
But
yes, you know.
That's why I'm here, because I covered it before too.
But the argument has to be, you know, you take a kid, you're a track coach. You take a kid who, you know, has had a broken leg for 3 years, and you start teaching him how to run when he's 14. You don't expect him to be a sprinter just because he's 18. You might say, hey, it may take you to 20. The notion that everything has to flower at the 18th birthday, I mean,
But can't that be an excuse? I mean, can't we also use that as an excuse for kids? Not achieving and say, well, it's okay, and it's not okay. And one of the big crises in our school system is the crisis of expectations.
Right.
The kids have been, for years, everyone said, oh, well, they have a single mother, and, you know, they're low socioeconomic, so, you know, they really can't do this. So it's okay, maybe they'll get it done by the time they're 21.
That's the dark side.
And then they also are told that they do well in English and they do well in math, and then they come to us in high school and the kid can't read and the kid can't even add things with maybe straight lines, but even with decimals, and they're getting they're getting such a bad feedback all the way through, and then they figure, well, something's wrong with these teachers, they can't, you know. But the thing was that when you look back, you know, even only 1 year, there was a change. I didn't make the next president or anything, but there was a change.
The kids changed.
The kids changed. The kids, even at the end, we changed. You had to change. The kids at the end of the year, when we did our final exhibition, we finished a project, and this stuck from what one of the kids said, and I said, well, wasn't it nice being able, we did cooperative learning, and they worked in a group, and we set special teams up and so forth, and they said I would never have been able to do this alone. So they were capable of realizing that they could depend on each other.
Woodward's teachers are part of a coalition in fact as well as in name. By mid-1994, the coalition had grown to include nearly 1,000 high schools. They're connected through frequent teleconferences, by computer, an electronic mail network that allows them to carry on a continuing dialogue, and by what the coalition calls critical friends, teachers from other coalition schools who visit regularly and offer support and advice. As the second year began, the program had doubled in size to include most 9th and 10th graders. With growth came more change. Dan Rivers, that math teacher who'd been so candid about his doubts, transferred to another school. However, his replacement and the 15 other teachers who've been added to the program began the school year without having had much training in the new approach. Are you nervous about this approach?
Yes, extremely. Can't you tell?
Well, teachers don't usually admit they're nervous.
Yeah, oh yes, I'm very nervous about this. It's a learning process for me too. I'm looking forward to this because I have been using the traditional method of teaching for so long.
In a lot of ways, it's a learning experience for me. I'm starting, it's almost as if I hadn't gone to school for a lot of the stuff because it's a different situation, sure. You're learning a lot on the job, no doubt about it.
I was a little apprehensive about going into something brand new. I've been teaching the same way for 25 years, and this is nothing like anything I've ever done before. I mean, we have to kind of let the kids take control, and instead of me being the dictator up front of the class, they've got to sort of have some input.
I talked to a first-year teacher yesterday in our language, and I met her down in the copy room during my prep, and the look was, I just felt for her, and she was almost in tears, and I just said, it's going to get better. She said, this didn't work here, I said, you have to understand that you're training students as well as yourself at this point.
The whole psychology of transition is very difficult. You're not where you used to be, you're not where you're gonna be, and in the middle, it's just hectic. There's no better word for it.
Change is hard work and inevitably breeds resistance, particularly from those who are outside the process. You remember that teachers in the coalition get to know their students pretty well and often provide a lot of guidance to youngsters. But of course, high schools already have guidance departments, and that means that toes get stepped on.
The science teachers, the English teachers, that's what we're talking about.
Here's what's different now.
In this meeting early in year 2, between the coalition teachers and the guidance department, conflict erupts over who should help students determine their class schedules, a process called optioning.
We have the kids in advisement and have time to start working on these option forms and have more access to parents, can make follow-up calls for kids who have poor attendance, can call at home and maybe option over the phone at some point. We can get you more option forms than I think you can, calling the kids down. I think that's fact. The question is, how can we work together then to perfect this system? If that's step 1, then what's step 2?
As it's stated here in the board manual, is that optioning is a private matter.
Rhetoric is one thing, but, we're trying here to help the kids, not to hinder them.
Well, we're trying to help them also. We see it from this point of view. We're looking at it strictly from board policy and what we've been able to do in the past, which we think is successful.
There was some discussion as to who would do the optioning process, the selection of courses for the next year. The director of the program had felt that anyone could be a counselor. As such, at times she was really committed to doing away with the counseling program here at Woodward. And as such, she built a lot of animosity and a lot of anger in the counseling staff.
Just the one-on-one ability to talk with the youngster about what their future is, what their current status is, where they're going, what society demands, what colleges demand, what their outlook for the future is.
You think we don't do that in advisement?
I don't know that you have the expertise that we have for that.
Well, we all graduates of college. We all understand what you need to go to college. Now, think about it.
That's very presumptuous on your part.
Yeah,
Because we're not counselors does not mean that we cannot counsel, nor have the expertise to do that.
Or even have the training, some of us have.
That's quite presumptuous.
The question is, who can best help the kid focus on what the potential is for next year? And my position would be everybody. I don't understand why we have to have this, either they do it or we do it stuff.
You see, what you have here is you have a clash over turf, over who is going to do what in the school. And you have people who are coming in and saying, well, yes, they can do your job.
Traditionally, students are sent down one at a time or summons to the counseling office to sign up for classes. Now, since the coalition, we've had these kids for 2 years. The teachers feel strongly that they know the kids, and so that they should have some role in trying to help the students to sign the 11th grade schedule. The counselors came in with the position today, all or nothing. Either you do all the optioning or we do all the optioning.
The counselors have gone through years of training as counselors, have a master's in counseling, are certified through the state. Does this all mean nothing?
Do you need a counseling department?
Sure. We're always going to need counselors. Do we need 5 counselors? Probably not. What we've done is redefined the role of a teacher. We believe in personalization. And if we're getting involved in the lives of kids, and that's been the traditional counselor role, then there's going to be conflict. Where does our job end and your job begin? My problem is that the counselors haven't been really willing to step into the arena in a consistent, ongoing way and have those discussions. Really put your boxing gloves on. Let's go at it. What's in the interests of kids? One of the aphorisms, I guess, in the coalition is everyone stays, but everyone changes. I believe that. But you have to be willing to change. You can't say, oh, I want to stay, but I don't want to change. It's not going to work.
There was a lot of anger in that session because the counselors felt that, here Miss Porter was trying to take their jobs away.
I do think it's important, like Diana said, that there be dialogue from the counselor back to the advisement teacher to actually round up those students who may have slipped through the optioning process so we do get everyone optioned. Is that what everyone has said? Is that what we're agreeing upon?
Just for clarity, I see nothing wrong that once the youngster comes down for the individual conference, that preceding that, the advisement teacher sends information down saying, well, my suggestions for John Jones are as follows.
Conflict. So much conflict. It's very difficult.
I've found my personal view is I've been shocked by people's lack of knowledge of what a change process is, should look like, and the pain you go through. I think people want instant answers, instant gratification, instant results, and when they don't get it, everything becomes too tough. And I think this is just an example of hard work.
In the initial planning, I think most people went along with it because they thought it was just another educational reform that would come and go. And so everybody got up. I remember the day when Mr. Brent said he wanted to take a vote as staff, and everybody, 90% of the people raised their hands. Yes, we're in favor of it. But they only thought, well, why not? This thing will come and go. Well, it hasn't. It's come and it's stayed.
We're trying to change an institution, the rituals for which are 100 years old, and the routines with which we teachers are familiar are so in our bones that to challenge them, to ask us to do differently, is a terrible wrench, which makes the argument for backing off very strong. Who needs this conflict? Just go into your classroom and shut the door. I'll go into my classroom and shut the door. We don't have to argue about this. That's very strong. So it takes extraordinary leadership.
Along with turf battles come personality conflicts. Diana Porter is comfortable in her role as leader of the coalition at Woodward, but not everybody is ready to follow the leader.
I think that Diana is not well liked by her teachers. In fact, if you could find 5 teachers in the building who really respect her, it would be a lot.
Liked and respected.
Liked and respected. I think there's little of each in this building.
I think Diana's done a good job. She's probably ruffled a lot of feathers along the way. You can't help but do that. And it's sort of in a non-traditional role. Usually the principal gets everybody angry. I think Diana served as a lightning rod to sort of deflect that by playing such a major leadership role. But I think she's totally capable and committed, and I don't think you could get a better person to run a program like that.
Is that just a resistance to change, or is that a personal thing? Or is it a combination?
I think it's a combination, especially when people think that the way change is being done, it's not being done properly.
How do you characterize Diana Porter?
I came here for one purpose, which was to start the coalition. That's why I transferred to this school. That's what my goal was, and I intend to stay here and accomplish that goal. And if for some reason, that wouldn't happen, I would probably happily go teach somewhere else. But I'm real committed to the idea of trying out professional growth for teachers, teaming, personalization for kids, and seeing if it can't work in a comprehensive and neighborhood school. I'm committed to that. So I'm not interested in a lot of other things, and that's probably hard to work with someone who's so single-minded.
As coalition leader, Porter is responsible for helping teachers who are having trouble breaking old habits.
Like me, if anybody in here is like me, you kind of like to go off to yourself and work by yourself and do your part. Just give me my work and let me do it. Anybody in here like that? Okay, well, you're going to have to change. Well, the way I see this thing, communication is something that teachers have not had. Sharing is something that we have never had. It's not part of the teaching tradition. This is something brand new. And it's hard for me because I'm basically a loner. I go off to myself. Now I have to be part of a team, part of a group, part of a working unit.
You don't want to be here?
That was not my first preference.
Does it scare you that Tony doesn't want to be here?
No, not anymore. It did. But it did. But I think that now I've seen this team work together. I think they'll do fine.
I had reservations about Tony because he was being honest that he did not want to be here. And I was saying, gosh, if he doesn't want to be here, I don't know if this is going to work. And what I've seen so far is I think it is going to work.
It will work.
Because Tony is very honest about his feelings, and that helps. That really helps.
These groups that you're in may not be your permanent groups.
Tony Walton, how's he doing?
I don't know yet. I can only speak as a team member. We all have had concerns throughout the quarter and brought them to the team. I think it is a different role.
Excuse me, but we need to stop working because we're watching Vicky's exhibition. She's doing the #2 exhibition on the 3rd floor.
Students like Vicki Thomas have opportunities to exhibit their learning throughout the year. Her math teacher, Jim Shad, transferred to Woodward because he wanted to be part of the coalition. Shad believes exhibitions are the best way to find out whether or not students are learning.
Okay, go, Vicki.
55% of the games that the Reds play were winning games. They played 110 games. How many games did they win? 55 games.
Oh. So you just subtracted it then, huh?
Yeah. Subtracted 110 games by 55%.
What does percent mean?
How many games that they played and were winning.
Oh, is that what percent means?
Yeah.
Percent means how many games?
Well, yeah.
Does anybody want to help Vicki out? What does percent mean?
That's what I said.
On that particular problem, I was surprised that she didn't, there was no understanding of percent.
I was a little surprised too. I thought she did know the percent, but obviously she was still, I think it's because of that rote method. She is so used to teachers saying, this is how you do it, and then I'm going to copy it. But she really still didn't have the whole concept of percent. And that's why she was just starting with a problem that she'd never seen before, a problem that had to do with percent, but this problem was an altogether new item, and she couldn't reason it out and couldn't think it out. What's the unknown in that problem?
How many games did they win?
How many games did they win? So that's going to be the what? The X. Okay, so why don't we erase that and set up the problem right? We'll work through it, okay? This is your first time, Vicki. This is how we learn.
How can she be halfway through her 9th grade and seem unfamiliar with percentages?
I don't think she's unfamiliar. She just doesn't know how to do it. It's like I said, she's been so used to copying the teacher. That's how she's got by. That's how she's been able to pass. Also, another thing is that she's been able to pass a test and get by with the test, but with these exhibitions, she can't get by. She might be able to, she's a smart enough girl to copy, and not copy in a sense, but mimic someone and be able to mimic someone, and she's a good student. She does all her homework, she turns everything in, and therefore she passes. But she still doesn't have the knowledge. 55 over 1? 55 over 100. So X over 110 should equal 55 over 100. Yes, I won't allow them to pass. I don't care how much homework they do. They will not pass unless they pass that exhibition. They have to have the knowledge to pass, not just the work.
Now, when you turned around to discuss it with the whole class, I had the feeling that not very many people understood that concept. And what do you do then? Do you stop and say, let's work on this concept?
We keep working on, this concept until we get it, until they can pass those exhibitions with those percents. And this is the very first exhibition in this class on those percents. We've got till March 1st.
Principal Michael Hicks did not bring the coalition to Woodward. He was an assistant principal under Mike Brandt. When Brandt left to become Cincinnati's school superintendent, Hicks inherited the job.
You see, when I walked in here, I wasn't sure if this was a program that the Mike Hicks wanted to support. I saw some real major problems with it. As a result, I know I wasn't fully committed to the program. I just stood back and let it run its course and see where it was going.
Hicks, like everyone else, is watching this experiment for signs of progress or evidence of failure.
It's a little hard to say how we're doing with the coalition until we get to some hard facts, some really hard statistics in. What I can say so far is that the signs look good. This is our second year of implementation of the program. Our attendance is up, and I would say that enthusiasm is there. The commitment is there. In terms of hard data, testing, the jury's still out on that.
There's actually another jury in this case, the state of Ohio. The state has created a 4-part standardized multiple-choice proficiency test, which every student in Ohio has to pass in order to graduate from high school. Although this machine-scored fill-in-the-bubble test flies in the face of the coalition's personalized approach to testing, what the state says goes. As the date of the proficiency test approaches, some teachers in the coalition are worried that low scores will reflect badly on them and on their students. In a near panic, they revert to traditional drill and practice.
Now, if a citizen wants to change the law, what can a citizen do?
Go to, he wants to change the
Look
law
right
through
here.
a petition.
Through a petition.
And then he has to go through the House, then goes to the Senate, and then goes to the President, and the President vetoes it. It'll go to the, what is it? If the President vetoes it, it's called a,
Let's look right here.
The state's 4-part proficiency test looks back, not ahead. It's supposed to measure how much students learned before they came to high school. But Woodward's teachers fear that their students haven't learned those lessons, thus the intense drill and practice.
But today looks like a throwback, though. I mean, you still had the kids in groups, but basically they were just cramming.
Well, they have to because they're getting ready to take a test in 2 days. So I don't think that you should throw out everything that was traditional. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater because you need some foundation and some structure.
In my days when I was a purist, I would say, what are you doing? The principal said, I'm doing what I need to do. I need to drill these kids so they outperform everybody else in the city, because if they do, then they'll leave me alone, and I'll get on with serious education. And that happens, sure.
All right, what's the lower house? Oh, and the upper house is, okay. So the bill is introduced, now just take box 1, bill is introduced in the House. Oh, okay. Look at your steps. Turn to page 46.
I have the sense that the proficiency test, the state mandated proficiency test, is at odds with everything that you're trying to do at Woodward.
Well, it's obvious that the philosophies are not similar, but it's a requirement, and we can't put our head in the sand and say because we're running a program that uses alternate means of assessment that we're not going to do the proficiency test. We'll have to pass the proficiency test.
It wasn't hard, but it wasn't that easy either. It's just basic 7th, 8th grade stuff.
You just had to remember it, basically, really. Because it was stuff we already knew, but you just had to remember.
And you are in 10th grade, so you took it in 9th grade.
Right.
And again, did you pass it in 9th grade?
I passed it in 9th grade.
Did you pass it in 9th grade?
First try.
Yeah. Did you pass it? Can we work down, did you pass the test in 9th grade? Do you remember? So you took it this year? Yeah. How about you all? Can I go down the line? Did you pass it in 9th grade? No? No?
I passed hard.
Passed the math part, I'm talking. You passed the math test?
Right.
Go.
Nope.
No?
Mine was quite difficult.
I don't know if that matters.
It was the same, but they taught us a different way on how to study for it.
So I don't understand. So in 9th grade, did you pass it or not?
It was very frustrating.
Ohio high school students have 8 opportunities over 4 years to pass the proficiency test. 90% of these 10th graders failed last year, and so they've taken it again. They don't know it yet, but many failed this time as well.
Suppose I told you that you didn't do very well this year.
We'll just take it over again until we pass it. I think they should give us something we can study from.
I want to go back to this young man over here. What? Say again?
I think they should give us something that we can study from. So we'll have some idea. I mean, we do.
They do. That's very good classwork.
Not all of it. They be changing it around though, a little too much.
What do you want to say, Ms.
What do I want to say?
Go ahead. Let's hear what Ms. McDermott announces.
4.5 weeks, I gave you packets upon packets upon packets and talked about them, and you're saying I gave you nothing?
Those are 10th graders. The 9th graders who took the test for the first time this year also did poorly. 96% of them failed at least one part of the 4-part test. Remember, the proficiency test is supposed to measure what students studied in junior high school.
Michael Ventus, reading, math, citizenship, he failed. Gary Walker, math and citizenship. Sharon, math and citizenship. Fred, all of them he failed.
We have mixed messages going at us. And I don't think that the test evaluates what we do.
If you had your druthers, what would you do?
What would I do? I wouldn't have this kind of a test. I think I'd deal more with outcome-based evaluation.
That probably sounds like gobbledygook to the public. What do you mean, outcome-based
How
evaluation?
do the students actually perform on an authentic job or task? Because test taking is not really how we function in the world.
Public announcement of Woodward's disappointing test scores just happens to coincide with the news that the Cincinnati School Board plans to cut $21 million from the city school budget. Although the coalition experiment gets the same amount of funding as regular high school programs, this double dose of bad news makes the reformers feel especially vulnerable.
Are you worried that somebody's going to pull the plug on this coalition experiment?
Absolutely, because we're in a year of $21 million worth of cuts are going to be made in our school district, and so it's going to get really brutal. And so this is really bad for us. No question about it. Whether it reflects reality or not, it is politically bad for us.
What are you going to do? What are you going to say to the reporter who calls, well, Miss Porter, I see your school's at the bottom?
That's why we're trying to break out scores and look and say, I think it's a fair question to ask, what do we do with kids when they're with us? Do kids improve when they're actually, in school for a year and a half? I don't know what to say to someone who says this year's 9th grade class did worse. I mean,
the state of Ohio has made it very clear that we will not be giving diplomas to kids who don't pass the test. And the last thing I need is a program that we've invested this heavily in, putting out an inordinate number of children who don't qualify for a basic 9th grade test.
Is this keeping you up at night? Are you worried sick about this? What?
no, it's just this week's trauma. Next week it'll be something new. No, I just think that Wednesday, this is going to come out in the papers. And if I were a parent of a child here, I would be concerned. I would call up. So I think we have to use this as an opportunity to talk to parents in the community about getting more involved, about supporting education. I mean, I think we have to see this, I guess, as something we can work through and use to get the kids more focused on what they need to do. Even though I don't 100% respect this as the end-all and be-all of education, I think it is a standard that says to kids, you're not doing well enough. And I have no problem with kids being told there are skills you have to have.
I've only been with these students half a year. That was proficiency results. I was only with the students for 7 or 8 weeks before they took that proficiency test. A lot of that has to do with their learning from kindergarten through 8th grade. And we talked about the results today. We looked at the positive side. I showed the students results earlier this morning, And they were looking at them, and I said, hey, you're doing good in algebra, not doing good in measurement. We've got to work on the measurement. And we're going to, in our team, we're going to take some time out of advisement and just work on measurement. So I've got some meter sticks I'm going to give to the teachers who are in charge of advisement, and we're just going to measure the classroom and stuff like that, because that's the type of stuff that they haven't learned in the home as much as maybe they should have had, and that's what they really need to work on.
So you're not giving up?
No, I'm not giving up. Last night I was kind of depressed, but I got through it. So we're not going to give it up.
The Merrill Report, the $50 million gamble, will return.